Good afternoon. I'm Ramona Abbott, and today we are getting up close and personal with Mark Kuntz, a professor of theater arts at Western Washington University and a well-known director in the General Bellingham area. Welcome, Mark. How are you today?
I'm great, thank you. Thank you very
Excellent. What I'd like to talk to you a little bit about today is, tell me about your craft. What brought you to directing?
I went to my father was in a production of Oklahoma when I was in grade school, and I had never gone to a piece of theater. But he got me a row in the front row in the balcony, and I watched him play the policeman. I can't remember the name of the character anymore, and I just thought it was a magical evening, and I can remember feeling like I want to do that someday. And I was in a play in junior high, and it took off, and I just fell in love with theater. And I had always thought that it was going to be something that I would just love to do, and it would be a recreational kind of thing. I was pre-law in undergrad, but I just fell in love with it. And I said, you know, if someone would pay me to do this, this would be a dream life. And I'm living the dream life. It's really amazing. Directing, I think everybody thought they were going to be an actor first, and that's what I thought. Right. And then I discovered I love telling stories from the director's point of view better than being inside of it as an actor. And as soon as I discovered storytelling as a powerful way of communicating the human condition, I got locked in.
So you studied somewhat as an actor then first.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
How does that inform your directing?
I think it informs the most in terms of how I talk to actors. Right. And so I was in a number of professional productions in Portland. I lived in the Portland area for a number of years and worked with a wide range of directors, had a lot of different directing styles. And at least I found for myself effective ways to communicate with actors and ineffective ways to communicate with actors. I remember once a director coming backstage to me at intermission and yelling and screaming at me at intermission in front of the entire cast. And I just logged that one in my head. I said, you know, when I direct, I won't do that. So I think that's really influenced it. And I definitely have an understanding, I think, of what it's like to have to approach the role from inside of the actor's head. So, and I think because of that, I think actors find me a fairly friendly director because I connect with what their job is.
One of the things that you are known for is a compressed rehearsal schedule. 10 days, and for those of you who don't know, Mark does a 10-day, frequently does a 10-day, very brief and intense rehearsal process, which means that all of the actors have to come off book. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, it's been very interesting, and I'd like to say that it came out of some moment of brilliance when I realized that there might be a different way of doing this. But it really came down to wanting to be a better dad. Teaching at Western Washington University, that's a lot of evenings away from home, and the only time to rehearse would be in the evenings, and and I wasn't proud of coming home late in the day and not having seen my kids. So I said, there's got to be a different way of doing this. And out of that kind of personal need to be a better father came a discovery of, oh, look, if we do a compressed period of time, the learning curve is very steep. The things that we did in rehearsal, which was not a day before, but was an hour earlier, are remembered. And the growth, the curve of learning is so steep that it's not unusual in a 10-day rehearsal period for me to be able to give a number of rehearsals off because the students, if I'm working at Western, and professionals when I'm not, because the learning curve is so quick. I do invite the actors to come in off book, and what that means is that they've spent a ton of time on their own working on the character. Right. Memorizing the lines is also about getting to know the character. They're living inside the script for a long time before I get to actually meet with them. And so they've done a lot of work, and I honor that work when we get together. And it's a collaborative process, so I'm interested in knowing what they've learned. Mm-hmm. And so much of their homework has already been taken care of in terms of who the character is and the history of the character and why the character does what they do. And I invite them to collaborate with me in the process of telling the story, based on what they've done in the 1 month or 2 months they've taken to get off book. So it really compresses the time, and many times they know more about the character than I do.
Which brings me to a question then. So sometimes, I think in longer rehearsal processes, that is more of a shared journey. So you have invited them to take a lot of that journey without your being there.
Right.
Have you had initial conversations around the part and your view or your vision?
It depends on the play and the actors. There are times when, if it's possible to get everybody in the room after it's cast to have a meeting to talk about the play, then I'll do it. That happens at Western.
Right.
I can do that at Western. But when I'm working with Bellingham Theater Works or outside when I'm flying actors in from wherever they're coming in, that's not possible. So a conversation on the phone about the play, conversation about how we're going to move in a direction that's not unusual, especially if it's a new actor that I haven't worked with. If it's somebody I've worked with before, typically it's a much shorter conversation, and because we know each other really well and we know what to expect from each other. And unless I'm headed in some direction with a play that is very unusual, I just let them go and let them do their work. And there's a trust that's already been developed, and we know that we're going to be able to come to some middle ground when we get together on the play.
How do you know when a play is the one? How do you select your plays?
You know, the older I get, the more interested I am in issues. I'm really interested in using the arts as a way of communicating the human condition, and sometimes it's the local issues that I'm interested in. Sometimes it's the national issues I'm interested in. Sometimes it's and as I get passionate about an issue, then it usually leads me to a play. That's one of the ways I choose a script. Another is playwrights will just come to me and say, hey, I have the script, and I'm really interested to find out if you find it interesting. And those have been really exciting new projects. The one that it's coming up is exactly that happened, where the playwright came to me and said, here's a show I'd like you to read. And I read it and went, oh, we have to do this.
Wonderful. Now, I know you did Border Songs, written by Jim Lynch, and then actually, I believe, reworked for the stage by someone I went to high school with, Brian Willis.
Oh, no kidding.
I
Oh, that's
did.
wonderful.
In fact, homeroom together, senior year.
Oh, wow.
Brian Willis all year, so I was thrilled to discover his success in that field. Can you tell us a little bit about the book it style, what that is, what that means?
The book, you know, it's interesting because I had known about this play for a number of years and had tried at a couple other venues to do it because I really liked the play. And I wanted to try this book it approach. As a director, I had never done this specific approach, so I was hungry. And I knew Brian really well, and I knew Jim Lynch really well, and so when Bellingham Theater Works started, it was obviously the first one I wanted to do. Plus, it was about the Bellingham, Whatcom County area. You know, the book at theater approach includes the actors speaking the narrative of the novel. And the novel coming out through the character's voice in a narrative form, which is, I think, unusual for audience members to hear. They're used to having characters just connect and interact and do that, but when the character actually talks about their subtext, and talks about the political, social, neighborhood, whatever it is that's going on, sounding more like a novelist, like they're the voice of the novel than they are the voice of the character. That can be difficult for audience members. But, you know, Book It's been going on for 30-some years in Seattle. It's wildly successful, focusing mostly on Pacific Northwest literature.
Oh, I didn't realize that piece. I think a friend of mine and I came, and I think we were probably a normal audience split. One of us, myself, found it very intriguing and interesting, and the other one, my friend, did not care for it as much.
Right.
So,
yep, it's a taste, I suppose, like anything else, and we had just that kind of response. You know, what I thought was really rewarding was people coming up after the play, tapping me on the shoulder and saying, oh, by the way, I was actually that character. I'm the person who goes through to the dairy farmers in Whatcom County and helps them with how their manure is in the field and how it should be kept out of the creek. And I went,
really?
They said, I recognized myself in your play. And a number of people did that, which I thought was wonderful. And that's rewarding when you're doing plays, local plays about local people, about local issues, when people actually see themselves in the play.
right. That leads me to another question. So everyone must have had some disaster on stage or something. Every actor has a tale of something going marvelously, horrifically wrong. What's yours from a director's point of view?
Oh boy, I've had some wonderful, horrific things. Lucky for me, most of them have happened in rehearsal. But I think the most terrifying moment of my life as a director is connected to also one of the most proud moments. It was the opening night of a brand new theater at Eastern Oregon University that I had helped design. And long story, very short. And it was we did the musical Working, and the last number is about people coming together as a community to build a building. And here we were in the building that the community had come together to build. It was packed house, absolute packed house. And the curtain came down, and it was a glorious evening, absolutely glorious evening. And the audience rose on their feet, and the audience and the actors had this wonderful standing ovation. They went off the stage, and the audience wouldn't sit down. They wanted to call them back out. But this was our first time in this theater. And so when they had left the stage, there was no way to communicate with them to tell them to come back out. And it was so sound tight, they had no idea that the audience was still standing. So, and they just knew, the audience just knew that somebody would go get them and send them back out on the stage. But and I was sitting right smack in the middle of the theater, so I couldn't get up and go through and run back and get them. And they stood there and clapped and stood there and clapped and stood there and clapped. And 10 minutes went by and they stood there and clapped. And I'm thinking, and I finally just told people, I said, they don't know you're clapping, I'm sorry. And finally the clapping stopped and they went home. That was horrible. It was horrible, but also in a wonderful moment. So
right, whoever knew a standing ovation could be so dreadful.
Dreadful, it was. But I was embarrassed. So from then on out, I told the actors, you don't get to leave the stage. If they call you back out again, we need to.
Right, be ready.
Be ready.
Be ready.
And they were actually called back one other time, which was very nice.
What does directing give you?
The part that I like the most about directing is working in the trenches with the actors developing the story. I have a hobby of making furniture, and I think it's really similar. How am I going to put these pieces together to come up with? Once it's done, sitting in the chair isn't nearly as interesting as actually going through the process of deciding what would be an interesting way for this chair to look, and for this to be a very unique, specific kind of chair. And I use sticks, and I make rustic furniture, and every stick's a little different. They're all a little more crooked. They're all a little, and when you put it together, every chair is unique and specific and different. And that's definitely what happens with a play. And discovering it with the actors, I'm always working with personalities that are unique, individual units that somehow we got to come together in a unit that, and so the process of putting it together, once it's done, I rarely go to my own shows.
Really?
I go to opening night and closing night, and
right.
I don't go otherwise because I said something about family and being with my kids.
Right.
So I can't go every night, or else I'd be going to the bad dad category. So, but yeah, once I see it, once I've seen the chair and I look at it, then I'm good. It's building it that's the fun part.
What have you had to give up?
That's really hard. Earlier in my life, when I was one of those directors who worked every night, right. I gave up a personal life, right. which was really important. I think my daughters who are older would say they would love to have seen their dad more.
Right.
So now that I have two young boys, I'm not going to make that mistake again. So I think it's the personal life. There is a part of directing, those of us who've been in the theater, that is a family. It becomes a group, a
right.
family, but that can't be a family outside of our other family.
Right.
So I think that's been the big give up.
I would like to thank you, Mark, for joining us today. This has been absolutely delightful.
It's been fun. It's been great fun. Thank you.
We've been getting up close and personal with Mark Kuntz, and we will see you next time.